In late winter of 2018, Miss Virginia Allen's kindergarten class at Indian Valley Elementary spent a week learning about Floyd County history, and especially Indian Valley's history. By week's end, it was Miss Allen's hope that the children would realize how special our community and our county are, and develop a sense of pride and respect for the rich history of our area. Hopefully, these experiences will lead to an awareness of our own links to the past and instill the motivation to learn even more, encourage preservation of the unique heritage of the area, and the desire to share their learning with future generations. We hope you enjoy this peek into the Indian Valley kindergarten classroom. Enjoy.
All right, boys and girls, this is Miss Keith and Miss Slusher. They're very special friends of mine who've come to talk to us today about Floyd County history. This is
Miss Hari. Hello. I'm from Citizens, and I'm going to make a show about your project. And you're learning about Floyd history.
Which means you will be making history.
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's neat.
We are so happy to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about our county. Do you know the name of the county that we live in? That's our state. That is our state. That is the state that we live in. And what county do we live in?
Floyd County.
There you go. Okay, so we're going to be learning about Floyd County, which is in the state of Virginia. Okay, Ms. Slusher, would you like to begin?
I would. We are here to talk about the history of Floyd County today. And is history a word that you know about? Have you heard that word before? Have you? And what do you think of when you hear the word history? Way back then in the old days. That is history. Recess that you just finished is also history, because it happened earlier and it really truly happened. History is stories. It is the stories about what people and what people did in the places in which they live. And another word, and we're not sure if Ms. Allen needs to use lots of good vocabulary words, but we bet she does. Another word we use is community. Have you heard that word before? Right here it is, community. And community is where you live and work and play and go to school. So where do you live?
Home.
At home. And where is home?
I live on Summer Hill Road.
So you have, your community is there. And when you come to school, this is where you work and play, right? So this is also part of your community. Yes.
I live straight across from school.
Good. And you have been learning about maps this year, and we're going to continue working with those a little bit today too. Now, Mrs. Keith and I have a problem. And our problem is what Ms. Allen asked us to do is impossible. There is so much history and so many stories that we would have to not let you go home for weeks and weeks and weeks. You'd have to stay here at night, in the daytime, and all the way around. So we're not going to get to tell you all of the history today, but we're going to have fun with what we do. Now, how do you know what happened way, way, way back in the past?
How do you find out?
What's one way?
What's one way you found out about what happened in the past?
Because people used to use that in the past.
How do you know?
Because they put one of the things up to your mouth and one to your ears to talk with.
But how do you know that? Because someone coming in who saw that would say, I have no clue what that is. How did you learn that?
Jake said it.
Okay, so you heard someone tell you. And that's a big way we learn about history. What's another way?
Watch a show.
There are good shows on television, and we're going to be on television, and people are going to be learning the history of Indian Valley's kindergarten when they watch this program later on at Citizens. That's another way. Can you think of any other ways you can learn about what happened long in the past?
Like you watch movies about old things in the past and like see things.
Right, those, and you actually see things. If you are looking at an old house, you're learning some history there, aren't you?
I see an old house every time I go by like this place and there's an old tree too.
Okay, that's another way. The flowers that I brought in today, have you ever been out riding around and you just saw some yellow flowers out in the woods? There's no house, there's no one nearby, but there's something like that blooming.
Yeah.
That's a signal that once upon a time there was a house there. And we are going to be telling you some other stories and things like that too. Another way we learn about history is from artifacts. And artifacts are things that people have made. And all this stuff I'm getting out of my pocket came out of the vegetable gardens on our farm, if I can get them out. So you may want to kind of look in close with me.
What's that?
Yeah, that's the first thing you have. Now, these have been washed, but these are exactly how they were in the garden.
Hey, guess what?
What?
We're going to field trip with an old school, and
Yes.
it only has one classroom.
Yes, and we're going to mention a little bit of that today. All right, we could spend a long time just on these artifacts, but what I can
There's
tell
something
you,
in the artifact. This one.
another piece. Some of these have been made by, and worked on by people. Which ones? Yes. Okay. That one was a marble. So that one some children maybe 100 years ago played with. It might have been Miss Keith's grandfather who lived in the house beside the garden where I found it. It might have been my father who also lived in that house.
Wait, I remember if you shine these, they'll look like
Sometimes, if it's clear enough. Indians also found these. And we are going to learn a lot more about Indians on Friday, but we're also going to talk about them some more in a bit. All right, but these are clues. This one I do have to tell you a little bit about though. What does it look like?
It looks like a falling down a tree with an owl living.
Ooh, that's cool. I didn't even think about that. Yes.
It kind of looks like when you have a egg in there.
It could be that. It is made out of rock, and it's made out of the same kind of rock as this. And I'm going to let you hand that, feel it. It feels sort of like a bar of soap, sort of greasy. And this one does too, if you feel this.
You can pass it around to the others.
Yes, let everybody
Let
have a
everyone
chance.
touch it.
Everyone touch each one. It feels like clay.
It does feel like clay, but it's kind of a soapy feeling clay, isn't it? This is a special kind of rock that has been found in Floyd County for thousands of years. And it's called soapstone.
Other rock.
It's going to feel very much the same. And this came out of the garden, and you had some really good ideas. What I think it was, that was something that had a little piece like a straw, and you could smoke it. Who said pipe? That's exactly. But this one was not made by the Indians. It has been sawed with the same kind of tool that you would saw wood. So that makes me think that it might have been my granddad who was playing around, and he made himself a pipe when he was a kid just to play with. It might have been Miss Keith's father, but someone in our family who was very playful and very good with tools did that. But these are all clues to history. Okay, has everyone had a chance to touch pieces?
Can you think of maybe another place that you would go to find information? What's a room in this school where you go to find information about things that happened in the past?
Art.
You go to your art room, okay. Do you have a special time that you go to the library? What might you find in the library?
Books.
There you go. So books are another source of information about our history. And we have some different books that are examples here. My sister and I wrote this book about our family history. And Mr. Amos Wood wrote a book about Floyd County. It's one of the ones that individuals go to find information about the very earliest of the settlers in Floyd County. Our Historical Society created this first book that Ms. Slusher showed you.
Photos.
We filled it with photographs. So photographs and books and artifacts and people telling you about stories and legends and experiences. We also have Mr. Ricky Cox's book about the mills in Floyd County.
Hey, I went there for it.
Oh, you recognize, okay.
Saw those and like water running out of
That's exactly right. That's
water up and
yes,
Yes.
yes. And then we have one other special book that we brought, which is the Floyd County, Virginia Heritage Book. And some of these books can be found at the Old Church Gallery, and some of them can be found at the Floyd County Historical Society Museum in Floyd at the Ridgemont.
And some of them are in your school library, I think. And if Ms. Allen wants to borrow these this week, and maybe you could look at some of the pictures and see if your family names are in some of the books, that would be fine if you would like to do that. There are not a lot of really good kindergarten books yet, so that may be the next thing we need to do, is figure out what you may have to write the kindergarten books so we can share those with everybody else. All right, let's just jump right along. Does anybody recognize that mountain? Have you seen anything around here that looks like it goes up and comes down and looks up?
yeah.
Buffalo Mountain is an important one we're going to talk about. This one's even closer to you. This is Max Mountain. And this photograph was taken from a cemetery where Indian Valley Post Office Road splits off from Indian Valley Road. So we could walk to it today. It's pretty enough we could. But Max Mountain, back in the old days, was a favorite place for people from Indian Valley to go and take hikes and enjoy how beautiful it is and how far they could see. Floyd County is in Virginia. We've already talked about that. Yes, and this map shows the yellow, the part that's colored in yellow is Floyd County. Now you learn about shapes in kindergarten, and a lot of you already knew about shapes. That's not a circle. What shape is Floyd County? It looks sort of like a shoe, yes. What do you think it looks like? You think it looks like a shoe also? Any other ideas? Oh, yes. In the old days, people said Floyd County is shaped like a flat iron. This is a flat iron. It's not flat everywhere. It is heavy. I'm going to give you a chance. Does it sort of look like the same shape?
Yeah.
Sort of. So if someone says to you, your county where you live, what shape is it? You could say it's like a shoe. You could say it's sort of like a triangle, couldn't you? If you go straight, straight, straight.
It's like a flat iron.
But it is a flat iron. Now this is heavy because it is made out of iron. And wonder what people used it for. What do you think? Making their clothes flat is exactly right.
Exactly right.
Yes.
What about smashing things?
Well, I'm sure people used it for that if their mothers were not watching because they didn't want it messed up. But before there was electricity, and if you will very carefully take both hands and hand it on to your neighbors, people had cook stoves in their kitchens that burned wood, and they were flat on top. So when it was time to get all of the clothes nice and flat and wrinkle-free, they would put these on top of the cook stove. They would get really hot. Do you think you would want to touch it if it was hot? No, so they had to take pieces of cloth and wrap around the handles, and then they would iron until it got cold, and then they'd put it back on the stove and let it warm up again. Okay, pass it on so everybody gets a chance to feel.
It's a dust.
Now, do you think that mothers had to have good muscles to iron? They did, and they only ironed about once a week. Okay, what else can we find? And I guess the flat iron can just land right here when it's done, can't it? Floyd County. Did you ever wonder who named Floyd County? That man had to agree to it. His name was John Floyd. And when Floyd County had its birth in 1831, John Floyd was the governor of Virginia. That meant he was the leader. He was like the principal for the state of Virginia. He lived in Montgomery County and then part of his life in Pulaski County. So they are neighbors of ours. And since he was governor and they wanted to make him feel proud, they said, we'll name this new county after you. So he didn't live in Floyd County. He was a doctor. So to my knowledge, he didn't come over and help sick people in Floyd County, but he was our governor. And so now we're Floyd County in his honor, in his memory. When you're out riding around, a lot of times you will see signs that will give you clues about history. And this one talks about Governor Floyd and when Floyd was born. And it mentions Buffalo Knob. So a lot of the history we've already talked about is packed into this one sign, plus some more. You may see this sign when you go on your trip on Friday, when you are in Floyd, very close to the stoplight. So if anyone is very observant and sees that, you tell Ms. Allen, and she'll tell us. Okay? Now, what does this make you think? It makes you think we've got to get to the buffalo. We're going too slow, aren't we? That's what you're telling me. What color are these mountains?
Green.
Kind of grayish, kind of blackish, kind of a little hazy looking. This was early on the morning.
I know what that stick is for. That's for a white so they can have electricity.
Oh, you may be right. I took this photograph one August morning when it was still foggy, riding along Indian Creek Road. So if you are driving or riding along the same place and look over to the right, you're going to see the same mountains. Not Buffalo Mountains. Now, it's hard to see as nice and bright as the room is, but these are actually looking very blue, even though the trees were green and brown. All right, these are parts of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
Does it sort of look blue if you look at it again?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bright blue, but it does. And Floyd County is part of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Do you recognize this spot?
Yeah. Yeah. Indian Valley.
This is the community of Indian Valley, and
This is the school.
the school, and I took this photograph driving along that same day too. So did you know you lived in such a beautiful community?
No.
It really is though, isn't it? All times of the year. All right, well, moving along.
That I recognize that creek.
Yes.
Me too.
Do you
I
know
go swimming in it.
do you know the name of it? Okay. Let's turn around so she can see you on the camera. She is representing a merchant. And here is the inside of a small store. A merchant was an individual who ran a store. And he might have something like this. Maybe a person brought to the store some butter that they had made at home, and the merchant would weigh it on the scale and would pay the person for how much the butter weighed. We also have this person representing James Monroe Simpkins. Tell them a little bit about James Monroe Simpkins. He went by his middle name, Monroe Simpkins, and he was quite a leader in Indian Valley. He was the mailman. He was also a man who had sawmills, and a lot of people worked for him. He had people working for him who were carpenters and building houses. But the photograph that is here is something that he and his friends built that no one else in Floyd County that we know of built. They built phonographs and had their own company, the Blue Ridge Phonograph Company. Have any of you ever seen a record player?
No.
A CD player?
I have.
All right. Records are the way they did sound and music long before they had CDs or before you listened to music on your MP3 players and on your computers and your iPads. So they used wood that grew in Floyd County, and Dan Huff made the cabinets, and they had a big company going for a long time. Okay, we also have builders who built homes. This is Glen Anna. You will also pass by it on your way on Friday as you go into the town of Floyd. It was built by Mr. Henry Dillon.
I see that all the time.
Of course, the oldest ones would have been cabins. And cabins would have been built out of what? What would they have used?
Wood.
Sure, they would have cut down trees to have the logs. This is an interesting brick that Miss Slusher can tell you a little bit about.
Don't drop it on me.
I'm not going to drop it on you. This was made out of clay that came from Floyd County, and you can see it still has rocks in it. And this was in a chimney of an old schoolhouse. But people in the old days made almost everything they needed, including bricks, including nails, including lumber for their buildings. All right, who have we got over here? Yes. Yes. Hold up your book. Hold up that to the camera. He wrote a book called Footprints in the Sands of Time. And one of the legends that he told about was of his grandfather, Matthew Cox, who had fought in one of the battles of the French and Indian War 20 years before we had our American Revolution to separate from Great Britain. And he told that his grandfather, Matthew Cox, had fought with then Colonel George Washington. And George Washington had said that he could go with some Virginia soldiers and that they could take care of the problems that the French and the Indians were causing. But the British general, General Braddock, said,
"Oh, I can't let a Virginia buckskin tell me what to do." So he decided to lead the group himself. When they encountered the Indians and the French, there were about 800 of them, and they ended up shooting General Braddock, who became very nervous and said to Colonel Washington then, "What shall we do?" And so Colonel Washington said, "We shall retreat." And the legend is that Matthew Cox was one of the individuals who helped to carry the injured General Braddock back to be cared for before his death. Okay, let's go over to the other table while the camera is on the Indians. Why don't we let Miss Slusher tell you about the items that is there with the Indians?
Indian Valley was named because when the first settlers came in, and that would be some of our family members, they kept finding in their gardens, in their cornfields, all of these things that had been made by people earlier, made by Indians. This one looks like what? It is an axe. And when we were little, we thought it was used for wartime, but we were wrong. This was used by Indians who were cutting down trees, and they were building homes. They came into this area long enough to have gardens and go hunting, and then they would move away in cold weather. This rock is a grinding rock, and if you feel it, you can see it's got the holes in it, and you would roll that along and you could grind up nuts or corn and make them into something that you could make into cakes and to eat. Okay, this is our representative of the Scots-Irish settlers, and we had a lot of settlers coming here from countries all across the Atlantic Ocean. So for the Irish, we think of Irish and potatoes. How many of you have gardens at home? Do you grow potatoes? You may have never had a chance to feel one. This is a piece of linen cloth, but this cloth, you want to hold it up for the camera? This cloth is made from a plant. And they grew that plant in Floyd County. The plant is called flax. On Friday at Old Church Gallery, you'll learn a lot more about that. All right, we have a farmer here.
Okay. This is called an oxbow. And the picture that we have with it is of some cousins as they are training a young calf, or two of them, to be yoked together, and they would put this under the neck of the young calves. As they got bigger and bigger, they had to get bigger and bigger bows, and they're training them to pull wagons, to pull plows, and most of the, as you were talking a few minutes ago, the olden days, they would have had either two or sometimes single yoke of oxen that they would put this on to pull their wagons and to do their work.
We also have, if you'll turn to the camera, German settlers, and this is kind of a neat thing. Can you read this page? Look at it. Can you read it? It's in German. It's in a different language. We read English here. That Bible came out of a house on Laurel Branch Road. And the first German settlers were Americans, but they still spoke German. On the back is a tombstone. It's made out of soapstone, the same material as that pipe that we looked at that came out of my garden. And you notice the design on the stone? That's an old German sign. The middle part is representing raindrops and the four seasons and the four directions, and then the stars and the circles are also an old German idea. We also had people coming from England. This tool, what do you think it is?
I don't know.
I know, it's kind of odd looking. This is a candle mold. Before there was electricity, they had to make their own lights.
Here, Ron, that's a candle.
So they would melt wax, and believe it or not, there were not honeybees here before the people came from England and Ireland and Germany and Scotland. So when they came, they brought the bees, and then the bees make wax. They could melt the wax, pour it down in here, put strings down in to make the wicks, the parts you light, and then when it cooled, knock it out, and they had how many candles?
6.
6, good.